11 seasons, 256 episodes, and a finale that 106 million Americans watched in a single night. MASH wasn't just a TV show, it was something people gathered around week after week, like it mattered, and it did. But behind every scene, every character, every carefully chosen prop, there were layers most viewers never noticed while they were watching. So, today, let's get into 18 hidden details you missed in MASH.
This hot lips, or I'll stop selling tickets to your shower date.
Detail 18. The show was almost canceled after its first season. When MASH premiered on CBS on September 17, 1972, almost nobody was watching. The show finished its entire first season ranked 51st out of all programs on television, near the very bottom of the ratings. CBS nearly pulled it. What saved it was a scheduling decision. In its second season, CBS moved MASH to Saturday nights, slotting it right after All in the Family. At the time, the most popular show on American television, MASH immediately jumped to the number 2 spot in the rating and stayed in the top 20 for every one of its remaining 9 seasons. It's a detail that tends to get lost in the show's legacy. Most people remember MASH as a landmark of television, which it absolutely was, but they forget how close it came to disappearing before it had the chance to become one.
I do a great Lindy. In fact, I taught Lindy everything she knows.
Oh, great. When we're through doing this.
Detail 17. The entire show was shot in California, not Korea. Every outdoor scene, the tents, the helicopters, the muddy hills, the dirt road, was filmed not in South Korea, but on a former 20th Century Fox movie ranch in the Santa Monica Mountains of California, now known as Malibu Creek State Park. The rolling golden brown hills of Southern California stood in convincingly for the Korean peninsula for 11 straight years. The interior scene, operating rooms, the swamp, the mess tent, were built on sound stages at 20th Century Fox Studios in Los Angeles. What most people don't know is that on October 9, 1982, as the production was wrapping up its final season, a brush fire swept through the Malibu location and burned most of the outdoor set to the ground. Rather than simply noting the loss, the writers worked the fire directly into the series finale, where it appears as an enemy bombing that forces the 4077th to evacuate. The destruction of the real set became part of the story. The location is still there today. Fans can hike roughly 3 miles into Malibu Creek State Park and find the rusted remains of vehicles, the old signpost, and the open ground where the camp once stood.
It isn't a girl sensor. Your wife is doing just fine. It's the hospital.
Detail 16. Gary Berghoff's left hand. For anyone who watched the show closely, Radar, Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly, played by Gary Berghoff, always seemed to be holding something in his left hand. A clipboard, a piece of paper, his teddy bear, or his hand would simply be in his pocket or tucked behind his back. That was intentional. Berghoff was born with brachydactyly caused by Poland syndrome, a condition that left 3 fingers on his left hand, significantly smaller than normal. He went to considerable lengths throughout the show's run to keep the hand out of camera view, something most viewers never noticed across 8 seasons of appearances. What makes this detail more interesting is the contrast. Berghoff was a real drummer, and in the episode Showtime, the music Radar plays on the drums was actually performed live by Berghoff himself, not overdubbed. He had developed that skill despite the deformity. Berghoff had also originated the role of Charlie Brown in the 1967 off-Broadway musical You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, before playing Radar, and he was the only actor from the original 1970 MASH film to carry his role into the television series.
One of them with a clever makeup job.
Corporal Klinger, isn't it?
Right.
Detail 15. Klinger was only supposed to appear once. Corporal Maxwell Q. Klinger, played by Jamie Farr, was written as a 1-episode throwaway character. The idea was simple: a soldier dressing in women's clothing to be declared mentally unfit and sent home, a joke inspired loosely by a bit comedian Lenny Bruce had done about getting discharged from the Navy. Klinger was never meant to last past a single episode, but something about Farr's performance, the combination of desperation, pride, and genuine warmth underneath the absurdity, connected with audiences and writers alike. The character kept coming back and coming back. He ended up appearing in all 11 seasons. By the later seasons, Klinger had been promoted to company clerk, the same role Radar had held, and had largely stopped wearing dresses. He stayed in Korea after the war ended to search for the family of the Korean woman, Soon Lee, whom he married in the finale. One small detail that often goes unnoticed: Klinger's wedding dress appeared 3 separate times across the series. Klinger wore it when he married his girlfriend Laverne Esposito over the radio. Margaret Houlihan wore it at her wedding to Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot, and Soon Lee wore it at her wedding to Klinger in the finale.
We will if you will.
Where did you get those costumes? What costume? The costumes you're wearing.
Detail 14. The laugh track was a compromise. The creators of MASH, including executive producers Gene Reynolds and Larry Gelbart, did not want a laugh track. They felt the show's blend of comedy and genuine human suffering made a Cannes studio audience absurd. If a soldier just had his leg amputated, you didn't want laughter punched in over the reaction shot. CBS overruled them. The network insisted on the laugh track, which was standard practice for sitcoms at the time. The compromise that was reached: the laugh track would be turned off entirely during operating room scenes. Over the years, as the show grew more dramatic and more confident in its tone, the laugh track was used less and less throughout the rest of the episodes as well, to the point where entire scenes in later seasons played with no canned laughter at all. The operating room scenes, in particular, took on a weight and quiet that felt genuinely different from anything else on network television in the 1970s. That silence was not accidental.
Hey, the distillery!
Detail 13. The pilot script was written in 2 days. When writer Larry Gelbart was brought on to adapt MASH from the 1970 Robert Altman film for television, he wrote the entire pilot script in 2 days. He was paid $25,000. That's it. No royalty, no ongoing participation fee. Gelbart went on to be one of the primary creative forces behind the show's early seasons, but for the pilot script itself, the document that established the tone, the characters, and the format of one of the most successful dramatic comedies in television history, he received a flat fee of $25,000 and nothing more. Gelbart later said he never negotiated a royalty arrangement, which meant that as the show ran for 11 seasons and then moved into perpetual syndication, where it never left the airwaves, he had no financial stake in any of it beyond his salary for episodes he wrote directly.
The toilet is how I'm doing. But can I find it is what I do.
Detail 12. Henry Blake's death was kept secret from the cast. When McLean Stevenson decided to leave the show at the end of season 3, the producers, with Stevenson's knowledge, made a decision that was nearly unprecedented for television at the time. Rather than have his character, Colonel Henry Blake, simply transfer away or retire, they killed him. His plane home was shot down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. What most people don't know is how the cast found out. The script for the final episode of season 3, Abyssinia Henry, was distributed without its last page. The cast filmed the entire episode without knowing what was coming. Only after all other scenes were finished did the producers hand out the final page, the one where Radar walks into the OR in the middle of surgery and reads the news aloud. The scene was filmed in 2 takes. The reactions were real. Gary Berghoff, Alan Alda, Loretta Swit, none of them had seen the dialogue before that moment. CBS was flooded with complaint letters after the episode aired on March 18, 1975. The network actually cut that final scene from some later rebroadcast. It remains one of the most remembered endings in American television history.
Pay no mind to my friend here. He majored in crudeness at med school.
Med school. Listen, before I was drafted, I was a transmission mechanic.
Detail 11. Wayne Rogers never signed his contract. Wayne Rogers played Captain Trapper John McIntyre for the first 3 seasons of MASH, Hawkeye's closest friend, co-conspirator, an equal partner in most of the show's early comedic energy. When Rogers decided he wanted to leave, the show's producers anticipated a lengthy legal battle. There wasn't. Rogers had never actually signed his contract. Through 3 full seasons of one of television's most successful shows, he had been working without a signed agreement. That meant he was free to walk away whenever he chose, with no legal obligation to stay. He left after season 3. The show recast the best friend role entirely, rather than replacing Trapper directly, bringing in Mike Farrell as B.J. Honeycutt, a different kind of character, quieter and more openly emotional than Trapper had been. Separately, a spin-off series called Trapper John, M.D. ran from 1979 to 1986. Following the character decades after Rogers had no involvement, the role was recast with Pernell Roberts.
Good to see you. Why don't you start on the bus?
Yeah, okay.
You feel up to it?
Detail 10. Several cast members had real military experience. A handful of the show's cast members had actually served in the military, something that gave certain performances an authenticity that's difficult to manufacture. Alan Alda had served in the Army Reserve. Jamie Farr, who played Klinger, had actually enlisted and served in the military. Mike Farrell, who played B.J. Honeycutt, was a former Marine, and Jamie Farr wore his real military dog tags from his own service throughout his time on the show. There's an additional layer to Farr's cast. He was born in Toledo, Ohio, just as Klinger was. The character's Toledo pride, his obsession with the city, his references to it in nearly every season, reflected something genuinely personal for the actor playing.
The Dodgers against the rest of the league?
Hey, I'll take some of that action.
Watch out for those Giants at New Kid Mason.
Detail 9. The show lasted 3 times longer than the war it depicted. The Korean War lasted 1,128 days, from June 25, 1950 to July 27, 1953, a little over 3 years. MASH ran for 11 years, from September 1972 to February 1983. The show's 256 episodes, set against a 3-year conflict, meant that each episode would have covered roughly 4.5 days of real time. The writers were aware of this arithmetic and occasionally acknowledged it through dialogue and character references. The show was depicting a war that lasted 3 years, while its characters aged 11 years in real life, something the production handled by largely avoiding specific dates and keeping the timeline deliberately loose. Still, it's a remarkable fact sitting quietly underneath the entire run of the series.
Captain Schaefer, Adjutant General Branch. I'm telling you, I can get you a discharge.
Detail 8. The signpost in the camp was a character in its own right. One of the most recognized props in television history is the wooden signpost that stood in the middle of the 4077th compound, pointing in multiple directions to hometowns across America and measuring the distances in miles. Boston, Crabapple Cove, Toledo, San Francisco, Mill Valley. What most viewers didn't track closely was that the signpost actually changed and grew across the show's 11th season. New signs were added as characters' backgrounds were established, and in a season 6 episode, Major Charles Winchester, the Boston Brahmin who replaced Frank Burns, personally added a sign pointing toward Boston. However, a few notable gaps existed. Hawkeye Pierce never added a sign for Crabapple Cove, Maine, despite it being his hometown. Radar O'Reilly never added one for Ottumwa, Iowa. These absences were never explained. The signpost itself was one of the props placed in the time capsule at the end of the penultimate episode. After the finale, much of the original set and its props were put on display at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History as part of an exhibit called MASH Binding Up the Wound.
Your appendix, kid, it's gone. How do you feel?
All ready to go out and kill me some more goose?
Detail 7. The guest star list reads like a Hollywood Hall of Fame. Before they were famous, in some cases, long before, a remarkable number of actors who later became household names passed through the 4077th. Ron Howard appeared as an underage Marine. Lawrence Fishburne appeared in a small role early in his career. Patrick Swayze played a soldier suffering from leukemia. John Ritter appeared in a guest role. So did Shelley Long, Ed Begley Jr., Blythe Danner, Terry Garr, Rita Wilson, and George Wendt. Leslie Nielsen had a recurring guest role as a colonel in multiple episodes. The show was filmed in Los Angeles, drew on a large pool of working actors, and ran for 11 seasons, which meant it served as an early platform for a huge range of talent over more than a decade.
Always one of my favorites. It's a designer original from Mr. Sid of Toledo.
You dodo, I can't use that.
Detail 6, the final episode was not the last one filmed. On February 28, 1983, the series finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, aired on CBS and was watched by 106 million Americans. It remains the most watched scripted television episode in U.S. history, but it wasn't the last episode to be filmed. The penultimate episode, As Time Goes By, was actually shot after the finale. That episode, in which the cast members buried a time capsule beneath the Fox Studios lot, was the final thing the cast filmed. The time capsule scene was a genuine cast event. Loretta Swit placed a Japanese robe and a white sweater. Jamie Farr later recalled adding a voodoo doll of Colonel Potter. Alan Alda's wife, Arlene, a professional photographer, captured the moment. The cast drank champagne from glass flutes, and each received an army shovel engraved with a personal inscription from producer Jay King. The items inside the real capsule were buried, and most have never been publicly identified. Detail 5. The real set was destroyed before the finale aired. On October 9, 1982, a brush fire swept through Malibu Creek State Park and destroyed much of the outdoor MASH set. This happened while the production was still in its final season. The finale had not yet been filmed. Rather than pretend the fire hadn't happened or rebuild the set, the writing staff incorporated it directly. In the finale, a fire breaks out near the camp, the result of incendiary bombs, and forces the 4,077th to evacuate. What audiences saw as a dramatic plot point was partly the writers responding to what had actually happened to their real location. Some of the original vehicles and equipment from the set were left behind when production ended. They rusted over the years, eventually becoming landmarks. A partial restoration in 2007 cleaned up the remaining trucks and Jeeps and added informational signage. They're still there.
One more thing. Klinger's Scarlett O'Hara again.
No, I draw the line.
Detail 4. Alan Alda was the only person who knew about Henry Blake, and that's not the only time Alda shaped the show. The detail about Alan Alda being the only cast member informed about Henry Blake's death in advance is well documented, but Alda's behind-the-scenes influence on MASH went much further than most viewers realize. Over the course of the series, Alda wrote 19 episodes, directed 32, and was involved in the creative development of storylines in ways that went well beyond his role as an actor. He pushed for the show to explore post-traumatic stress, moral ambiguity, and the psychological costs of war, material that was unusual for a network comedy drama in the 1970s. He also asked Mike Farrell to grow a mustache before season 7, a personal request between real-life close friends, which Farrell did, and which the character BJ kept for the rest of the series. The episode Dreams, which depicted the character's surreal, disturbing dreams during a period of relentless casualty, was Alda's idea. The episode Point of View, filmed entirely from the perspective of a wounded soldier who cannot speak, was another departure from format that the show pursued with Alda's involvement.
No, my mother gave me these for my birthday.
It's time they went to a party.
Here, come on.
Detail 3. The writers punished the cast for complaining about script. In the early seasons of the show, the cast members were vocal, loudly vocal, about their opinions on script. They gave notes, complained about dialogue, pushed back on storylines. According to head writer Ken Levine, the volume of notes from the actors became genuinely disruptive to the writing staff. The writers' response was elegant in its pettiness. They started writing in scenes specifically designed to be miserable to film. The most famous example, a long winter scene that required the cast to perform extended sequences in heavy parkas and full cold weather gear, while the production was shooting on location in Malibu in the middle of summer, in temperatures that made the coats nearly unbearable. The complaints stopped The notes stopped. The cast and writers reached an unspoken understanding, and the relationship between performers and writing staff settled into something more functional for the remainder of the run.
No, although that was intriguing, I was referring to the Winchester Gambit.
Oh? Detail 2. MASH was the first TV show to use a specific piece of language. The show pushed language boundaries that network television had treated as firm for decades. Among the milestones, MASH was the first television program to use the phrase son of a bitch on broadcast network TV. It was a small thing in isolation, but it was part of a broader pattern. The show used language that reflected how people actually spoke under stress, particularly in a military environment and a surgical unit dealing with mass casualties. The authenticity of that language was part of what made the 4077th feel like a real place, rather than a sanitized television version of one. CBS and its Standards and Practices Department were in an ongoing negotiation with the MASH production throughout the show's run. The show won some of those negotiations. That one, it won.
Listen, I am talking to you from my OR. I need a surgeon so bad.
Detail 1, the operating room set, ended up in the Smithsonian. After the finale aired on February 28, 1983, CBS and 20th Century Fox arranged for a significant portion of the show's original props and sets to be donated to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The centerpiece was the operating room set, the same OR, where Hawkeye and BJ and Trapper and Winchester had worked through hundreds of episodes, which was reassembled and displayed in the National Museum of American History as part of the exhibit MASH, Binding Up the Wounds. Also donated was the collection of signs from the signpost, costumes worn by the principal cast, and various props from the camp. Radar's teddy bear, arguably the most emotionally loaded prop in the show's history, was supposed to be part of the initial donation, but when the items were cataloged for display, the bear couldn't be located. It was eventually recovered and later sold at auction. In 2005, it sold for $11,800. The operating room set remained on display at the Smithsonian for years, one of the few pieces of American television history preserved at that level, a recognition not just of the show's ratings, but of what it had meant to the country that watched it. And those are 18 hidden details you missed in MASH. Some of them were built into the show deliberately. Others were accidents of circumstance that the writers turned into something more. And a few were just the quiet facts that sit behind 11 years of television, the kind of details that don't change what you remember about the show, but they do add something to it. If you enjoyed this one, go ahead and like the video. It helps more than you might think. And subscribe if you want to keep watching. We do these regularly, and there's always more to find in the shows and moments that meant something. Thanks for watching.